The Seattle drizzle tapped against the windows of Innovate Tech's 15th floor conference room as I sat across from my direct supervisor, Marcus Webb, watching him scroll through emails with the kind of casual indifference that had characterized our working relationship for the past 3 years. At 29, I'd climbed from junior developer to senior software architect through 60-hour weeks, innovative solutions that had saved the company millions, and a track record of successful project launches that had earned recognition from everyone except the man who controlled my career advancement. The quarterly review meeting that would change everything had been scheduled for 30 minutes, but Marcus had spent the first 20 discussing his weekend golf game and his teenage son's college prospects, while completely ignoring the performance metrics that should have been the focus of our conversation. Marcus Webb had joined Innovate Tech as a department manager 5 years ago, bringing with him an MBA from a second-tier business school and an uncanny ability to take credit for his team's technical achievements while contributing little more than buzzword-heavy presentations to actual project development. At 45, he possessed the kind of corporate confidence that mistook management jargon for leadership ability, and he'd built his reputation within the company by claiming ownership of innovative solutions developed by the engineers he supervised. His lack of technical knowledge was legendary among the development team, but his skill at corporate politics had somehow earned him the trust of senior executives who valued his ability to translate complex technical concepts into simplified business language they could understand. The promotion opportunity that had brought me to Marcus's office that rainy Thursday afternoon represented everything I'd been working toward since joining Innovate Tech as a fresh college graduate 6 years ago. The position of lead systems architect had been posted internally for 2 weeks, and every qualification listed in the job description matched my experience perfectly. Advanced programming languages, cloud infrastructure expertise, team leadership experience, and a proven track record of delivering enterprise-level solutions on time and under budget. I'd spent the weekend updating my internal application with detailed project summaries, performance reviews, and recommendations from colleagues who'd witnessed my contributions to the company's most successful software launches. What made my interest in the promotion particularly compelling was my role in developing CloudSync, Innovate Tech's flagship product, that had revolutionized how small businesses managed their data infrastructure and generated over $40 million in revenue during its first year of availability. The innovative architecture I'd designed had earned industry recognition and been featured in 3 major technology publications, while the user interface improvements I'd implemented had reduced customer support calls by 60% and increased client retention rates to levels that exceeded our most optimistic projections. But despite my central role in CloudSync's development and the company's subsequent success, Marcus had consistently overlooked my contributions during team meetings, performance reviews, and presentations to senior leadership. My innovative solutions were regularly presented as team achievements or department initiatives without specific attribution, while my direct reports and project leadership experience were minimized in favor of highlighting the management skills of supervisors who'd had minimal involvement in actual development work. The pattern had become so predictable that other engineers in the department had begun privately commenting on the disparity between my contributions and the recognition I received. As Marcus finally turned his attention from his email to our supposed performance review, I prepared to advocate for the promotion that would finally align my job title and compensation with the value I'd been delivering to Innovate Tech for years. The lead systems architect position represented not just career advancement, but validation that technical expertise and proven results could overcome the office politics that had kept me artificially constrained in roles beneath my capabilities. What I didn't anticipate was that Marcus's response to my promotion inquiry would reveal the depth of his disrespect for my professional qualifications and his confidence that his opinion was the only one that mattered in determining my career trajectory within the company. Marcus's reaction to my mention of the lead systems architect position was immediate and dismissive, as if I'd suggested something so unrealistic that it didn't merit serious consideration. "Amanda, I appreciate your ambition, but that position requires someone with real leadership experience and enterprise-level strategic thinking," he said with the patronizing tone that successful men used when explaining why women weren't ready for advancement opportunities. "Maybe in a few more years, after you've had time to develop the kind of comprehensive business understanding that senior technical roles demand." His casual dismissal of 6 years of proven performance felt like a physical blow, especially since he'd never demonstrated any of the strategic thinking or leadership abilities he claimed were necessary for the position. The irony of Marcus questioning my readiness for leadership responsibilities wasn't lost on me, given that I'd been unofficially managing our development team's most complex projects for the past 18 months, while he focused on administrative duties and relationship management with other department heads. The CloudSync project that had generated millions in revenue had been my responsibility from initial architecture design through final deployment, including managing a team of 12 developers, coordinating with multiple departments, and delivering presentations to C-level executives who'd specifically requested my technical insights rather than Marcus's simplified summaries. Marcus, I think my work on CloudSync demonstrates exactly the kind of enterprise-level thinking the position requires, I replied, keeping my voice professional despite the frustration building in my chest. The system architecture I designed has been handling over 10,000 concurrent users with 99.9% uptime, and the security protocols I implemented have prevented any data breaches despite handling sensitive financial information for thousands of small businesses. My recitation of specific achievements felt necessary to counter his vague claims about my lacking qualifications, though I suspected that concrete evidence wouldn't change his predetermined opinion about my readiness for advancement. Marcus's response revealed that he'd been taking credit for my technical achievements for so long that he'd apparently convinced himself that he'd been responsible for CloudSync's success. Amanda, CloudSync was a team effort that required careful management and strategic oversight to coordinate all the moving pieces, he said, with the confidence of someone who'd somehow forgotten that his primary contribution to the project had been forwarding emails and scheduling status meetings. The kind of high-level thinking that made that project successful is what we need for the lead architect position, and that comes from years of management experience rather than just technical skills. The suggestion that my role in CloudSync had been limited to technical skills, rather than strategic leadership, was so inaccurate that I wondered if Marcus had confused our project with someone else's, or if he genuinely convinced himself that architecture design, team coordination, and enterprise-level problem-solving were somehow separate from the management responsibilities he claimed to value. Marcus, I designed the entire system architecture, managed the development timeline, coordinated with security and operations teams, and presented the final solution to the board of directors, I said, my voice carrying the edge of someone whose patience was rapidly depleting. But it was Marcus's next comment that would cross the line from dismissive to openly insulting, revealing his true opinion about my professional capabilities and career prospects within Innovate Tech. Look, Amanda, he said with a laugh that carried no warmth or humor. I admire your enthusiasm, but you need to be realistic about your career trajectory. The lead systems architect position is going to someone with the kind of gravitas and industry respect that takes years to develop. Maybe focus on becoming the best senior developer you can be, rather than reaching for roles that aren't a good fit for your current skill set. His pause before current skill set was loaded with implications about gender, age, and his assessment of my limitations that had nothing to do with my actual qualifications or performance record. The condescending laughter that followed Marcus's suggestion that I focus on becoming the best senior developer echoed in the conference room like a slap in the face, revealing his complete dismissal of my qualifications for advancement and his assumption that I should be grateful for whatever role he deemed appropriate for someone of my current skill set. His casual destruction of my promotion aspirations felt particularly cruel, given that he'd just finished describing qualifications that I possessed in abundance, while somehow concluding that I wasn't ready for opportunities that were perfectly aligned with my experience and achievements. As I sat across from Marcus processing the magnitude of his disrespect and willful ignorance about my contributions to the company's success, I felt my phone buzz with an incoming email notification that would completely transform the dynamics of our conversation. The message that appeared on my screen carried the sender information that would shatter every assumption Marcus had made about my career prospects and his role in determining them. From Robert Chen, CEO. Subject: Lead Systems Architect Position. Confidential discussion requested. The email from CEO Robert Chen was brief, but devastating to Marcus's narrative about my qualifications and readiness for advancement. Amanda, I hope you'll consider applying for the Lead Systems Architect position that was just posted. Your work on CloudSync has been exceptional, and I believe you're exactly the kind of innovative leader we need in this role. Could we schedule a confidential lunch meeting this week to discuss the position and the strategic direction I envision for our technical leadership team? I'm very interested in your thoughts about our technology roadmap and how this role could help drive our next phase of growth. The irony that our CEO was actively recruiting me for the position that Marcus had just dismissed as beyond my capabilities was so perfect that I almost smiled despite the anger still burning in my chest from his condescending lecture about career realism and appropriate aspirations. Robert Chen's email confirmed what I'd suspected about my value to the company. That senior leadership recognized my contributions and potential in ways that my direct supervisor had either failed to notice or deliberately ignored, in favor of maintaining his own position as the primary technical authority in our department. Marcus continued his monologue about career development and realistic goal setting, apparently unaware that his assessment of my promotion prospects was being contradicted in real time by the person who actually made such decisions at Innovate Tech. The key to success in technology companies is understanding your place in the organizational hierarchy and excelling within appropriate boundaries, he said with the wisdom of someone who'd apparently mistaken political maneuvering for professional insight. Sometimes the best career move is demonstrating loyalty and competence in your current role, rather than constantly pushing for advancement that might not align with your strengths. The suggestion that seeking promotion represented disloyalty rather than ambition revealed Marcus's fundamental misunderstanding of how high-performing employees approached career development, particularly in the technology sector, where innovation and growth were explicitly valued over hierarchical deference. His advice about appropriate boundaries and organizational hierarchy felt like coded language for keeping ambitious women in subordinate positions where their achievements could be managed and attributed to male supervisors who understood how to navigate corporate politics more effectively than technical challenges. As Marcus prepared to conclude our meeting with what he probably considered helpful guidance about managing my career expectations, I realized that the moment had arrived to reveal the email that would demolish his authority over my professional future and expose his ignorance about my actual standing within the company. The CEO's lunch invitation represented more than just a promotion opportunity. It was validation that my work had been recognized at the highest levels of the organization, and that my technical leadership was valued by people who actually understood the strategic importance of innovation in our competitive market. The decision to reveal Robert Chen's email felt both necessary and satisfying as I realized that Marcus's dismissive treatment of my promotion aspirations was about to collide with the reality that our CEO had already identified me as the ideal candidate for the position. Marcus, before we finish this conversation, there's something I think you should see, I said, my voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who was about to fundamentally alter the power dynamics of our working relationship. As I turned my phone screen toward him, I could see his expression shift from condescending authority to confusion as he processed the sender information and subject line of the message that contradicted everything he'd just told me about my career prospects. Marcus's face went through a fascinating series of emotional transformations as he read Robert Chen's email requesting a confidential lunch meeting to discuss my qualifications for the lead systems architect position that he'd just finished explaining I wasn't ready for. The color drained from his cheeks as he apparently realized that his assessment of my career trajectory was not shared by the person who actually made promotion decisions at Innovate Tech, while his earlier confidence about organizational hierarchy and appropriate boundaries suddenly seemed far less certain. I don't understand, Marcus said weakly, his voice lacking the authoritative tone he'd been using throughout our meeting. When did Robert Chen become aware of your interest in the architect position? I haven't submitted any recommendations for internal candidates yet, and I assumed all promotion discussions would go through proper departmental channels. His confusion about how the CEO had learned about my qualifications revealed that he'd never considered the possibility that senior leadership might evaluate talent independently of his filtration and recommendation process. The reality that Marcus was apparently unaware of was that Robert Chen had been personally involved in reviewing the CloudSync project's success metrics and had specifically asked our chief technology officer about the technical leadership behind the innovative solutions that had generated such impressive results. Marcus, Robert Chen has been tracking our department's project outcomes for months, I explained with the patience of someone educating a supervisor about company operations he should have understood. When CloudSync exceeded all performance benchmarks and generated $40 million in first-year revenue, he wanted to understand who was responsible for the technical innovations that made that success possible. Marcus's attempt to maintain some authority over the situation revealed his desperation to preserve his role as gatekeeper for department promotions, and his discomfort with learning that his assessments of employee qualifications weren't shared by senior leadership. Well, even if Robert Chen has expressed interest in your application, the promotion process still requires departmental evaluation and my recommendation as your direct supervisor, he said with diminishing confidence. There are proper procedures for advancement that need to be followed regardless of any informal conversations that might have occurred. But the second email notification that arrived on my phone during Marcus's explanation about proper procedures would deliver the final blow to his assumption that he controlled my career advancement within the company. Actually, Marcus, it looks like there's an update to the process, I said, reading the new message from Robert Chen that had arrived while we were talking. The CEO just sent a follow-up email scheduling our lunch meeting for tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and he's asked me to prepare a presentation about my vision for the technical leadership role that he'll be sharing with the board of directors next week. The mention of a board presentation that would bypass Marcus entirely sent visible shockwaves through his system, as he realized that his role as departmental gatekeeper had been completely circumvented by senior leadership, who'd identified me as a strategic asset worth developing independently of traditional reporting structures. His earlier lecture about organizational hierarchy and appropriate career boundaries was crumbling in real time, as he confronted the reality that his authority extended only as far as senior leadership allowed, and that his assessment of my qualifications apparently carried less weight than he'd assumed. The transformation in Marcus's demeanor was immediate and complete, as he processed the implications of my scheduled lunch meeting with the CEO and the board presentation that would effectively remove him from any role in my promotion process. Amanda, I think there may have been some miscommunication about your qualifications and readiness for advancement, he said with the kind of desperate diplomacy that people employed when they realized their earlier positions had become untenable. Perhaps I was being overly cautious in my assessment of the timeline for your career development, and maybe we should revisit the conversation about your promotion application. The irony of Marcus suddenly discovering my qualifications for a position he'd dismissed just minutes earlier wasn't lost on me, particularly since nothing about my experience or achievements had changed during our conversation, except his awareness that the CEO disagreed with his assessment of my capabilities. Marcus, my qualifications for the lead systems architect position are exactly the same now as they were when you laughed at my interest in applying, I replied with the steady tone of someone who was no longer willing to pretend that his opinion mattered in determining my career trajectory. His attempt to reframe his earlier dismissal as cautious assessment, rather than condescending rejection, revealed Marcus's desperation to minimize the damage to our working relationship and his authority within the department. I want you to know that I've always valued your technical contributions to our team, he said with the kind of revisionist history that supervisors attempted when they realized they'd underestimated someone's importance to the organization. If you're moving forward with the architect position, I'd be happy to provide a strong recommendation based on your excellent performance on projects like CloudSync. The offer to provide a recommendation for achievements he'd spent years minimizing and taking credit for was particularly galling, especially since his support would now carry less weight than the direct endorsement I'd already received from senior leadership, who'd actually witnessed my contributions. Marcus, I don't think my promotion process will require your recommendation, I said diplomatically, though the subtext was clear that his role in my career advancement had been effectively eliminated by the CEO's direct involvement in my candidacy. But Marcus's next comment revealed that he was beginning to understand the broader implications of learning that his star employee had been operating at a level of recognition and respect within the company that he'd been completely unaware of. Amanda, how long has Robert Chen been aware of your individual contributions to our department's projects? He asked with growing concern in his voice. Because if senior leadership has been tracking your work independently, that might affect how they view our department's overall management and reporting structure. The question about CEO awareness of my contributions opened the door for me to reveal the extent to which Marcus's version of departmental achievements differed from senior leadership's understanding of who was actually responsible for our team's success. Marcus, Robert Chen specifically mentioned in his email that he's been following my work since the CloudSync launch, because the CTO recommended me as someone whose technical innovation was driving significant business results, I explained, watching his face pale as he realized that his attempts to claim credit for my achievements had been transparent to the executives who mattered most. The revelation that our chief technology officer had been specifically tracking my contributions and recommending me to the CEO sent visible shockwaves through Marcus, as he apparently understood that his role as intermediary between his team and senior leadership had been bypassed by people who recognized talent independently of departmental politics and credit attribution games. The lunch meeting scheduled for tomorrow wouldn't just be about my promotion. It would be about establishing a direct reporting relationship that would eliminate Marcus's ability to filter, minimize, or claim ownership of my future achievements. As the reality of his diminished authority settled over Marcus, I could see him calculating the broader implications of learning that his most productive employee had been operating with CEO-level recognition, while he'd been treating her as someone whose career aspirations were unrealistic and presumptuous. I hope you understand that I've always tried to provide guidance that would help you succeed within our organizational structure, he said, with the kind of desperate damage control that supervisors attempted when they realized their management approach had been fundamentally misguided. If there were opportunities for advancement that I didn't adequately support, that was never intentional. The suggestion that his systematic dismissal of my qualifications and minimization of my achievements had been unintentional rather than deliberate revealed Marcus's attempt to rewrite history in a way that would preserve some shred of his credibility as a supportive manager. Marcus, you literally laughed when I asked about the promotion and told me I should focus on being the best senior developer I could be, rather than reaching for roles that weren't a good fit, I replied, my voice carrying the precision of someone who remembered exactly how her professional aspirations had been dismissed. His visible wincing at my recitation of his earlier comments suggested that Marcus was beginning to understand how his condescending advice would sound to senior leadership, who'd already identified me as executive material worth developing for strategic roles. I think perhaps I was being overly conservative in my assessment of the promotion timeline, he said weakly, apparently hoping that framing his dismissal as conservative rather than dismissive would somehow minimize the damage to his reputation as a talent developer. But the third email notification that arrived during our conversation would deliver the final confirmation that Marcus's role in my career development had been permanently altered by senior leadership's direct intervention in my advancement process. Actually, Marcus, there's one more update, I said, reading the latest message from Robert Chen that had arrived while we were talking. The CEO just confirmed that effective Monday, I'll be reporting directly to the CTO during the transition period for the lead systems architect role, which he says is expected to be formalized within 2 weeks pending board approval. The news that I would be removed from Marcus's supervision entirely, regardless of whether the promotion was officially confirmed, sent him into visible panic as he realized that his department was losing its most valuable contributor, while he faced potential questions about why he'd failed to recognize and develop the talent that senior leadership considered essential to the company's strategic direction. Amanda, I hope this transition won't affect our working relationship or your willingness to collaborate on department projects that still require your expertise, he said, with the desperation of someone who'd just learned that his team's success had been dependent on someone whose value he'd consistently underestimated. The irony that Marcus was now concerned about maintaining access to my expertise after spending years minimizing my contributions and blocking my advancement was almost amusing, except for the professional frustration I felt about wasting 3 years working under someone who'd been actively hindering my career development. Marcus, I'm sure we'll continue to collaborate professionally as needed, I replied diplomatically, though we both understood that the power dynamics of our relationship had been permanently altered by senior leadership's recognition of my actual value to the organization. As I gathered my materials and prepared to leave the conference room where Marcus's laughter had inadvertently triggered the revelation that would transform my career trajectory, I felt a satisfaction that went beyond just personal vindication. The email from Robert Chen represented validation that technical excellence and innovation were recognized and rewarded at the highest levels of Innovate Tech, regardless of the political barriers that middle management might create to protect their own positions. The woman who'd been told to be realistic about her career aspirations was walking away from a supervisor who'd just learned that his assessment of her qualifications was completely disconnected from senior leadership's strategic planning for the company's future. The lunch meeting tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter, where my contributions would be valued appropriately, and my career advancement would be determined by performance, rather than by the opinions of managers who'd never understood the technical complexity or business impact of the work they'd been claiming credit for. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated isn't arguing or proving your worth. It's letting the people who actually matter discover your value independently and make decisions based on results rather than bias.